Hey everyone, it's Brian Katonic with Starnes Realty, and welcome to another edition of What's Shaking in Aiken. Hope you had a good summer so far. Started with a lot of rain, and now it's been hot. So I hope you guys are hanging in there. Today we have a real treat. We have a friend of mine and the Chancellor of USC Aiken, Dan Heimmermann, who is celebrating his fourth year at the university. Dan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. A little warm out there, but hanging in there so far. Glad to
Right,
be
right.
inside right now.
Well, seeing you on the Zoom, you definitely look more dapper than I do with your sports coat and nice shirt. For you guys that don't know, Dr. Heimerman came to Aiken 4 years ago, July. Is that right?
Yeah, 2001. Yes, exactly.
Okay. And his background, he has a doctorate from, I think, Marquette University.
Yes,
And I believe your doctorate's in French history, correct?
right.
How does one decide to get a doctorate in French history?
Well, I always liked history. And then when I was in college, I decided, okay, I'm going to major in history. And of course, this is a well-known story about me and every other history major. Naturally, you're always asked, okay, what are you going to do with the history major? And but this was back in Wisconsin, and of course, I didn't really know. In fact, I remember one funny story. I'm sitting in the back seat. My dad was driving. His other engineer friends were in the car, so they're all engineers, and they asked me, "Hey, Dan, what classes are you taking?" And I was taking some really cool classes, and one of them, I knew this would rattle their cage, so I brought it up. I said, "It's German spies and counter spies of the 18th, 19th, and 20th century." And I stopped talking and I looked at them. You could tell they were looking at each other with a grin on their face. And then finally, one of them, I give him credit, had the courage. Of course, I was only 20, so he didn't need much courage. He said, "Hey, so Dan, where does that fit in the real world?" And, I didn't always do the right thing when I was 20 years old and certainly didn't give the right answer. But then I actually did. I said, "I don't know. I just like the class." So, and that's what we tell all the prospective history majors, major in what you like. But anyway, so I knew I always liked European history. So when I went to graduate school, I took a few professors, and my favorite happened to be a French historian. And of course that was it. Of course, if you do history in Europe, France was a major country in the 17th and 18th century. That was my area of interest. So I majored in that and got the master's and then the PhD and then became a history professor in Alabama. So and that's what I thought I was going to do, as many people do, continue to teach at the university level for really forever. In fact, that's what most professors do because it is a great gig, a lot of freedom in that. And but then, of course, I decided, well, I may want to do something a little different because, as my dad always told me, Dan gets bored easily, and he's right. He was right there too. And I became a department chair in Alabama, and then decided to go on and become a dean. And most of my career as an administrator has been in Texas. I came from the University of Texas system, was a dean there, and then provost, which is the vice president for academic affairs, typically the number two person, and had a great time in Texas. We really enjoyed living in Texas, and then came here in 21 to assume what I believe is the pinnacle of my career, and that's being the chancellor here at USC.
Well, the way I got to know Dan is right after he came to USCA, I was on a board at USCA, and I met him very, very briefly. And a few weeks later, at my old job, my secretary beeps at us and says, "Hey, you have a call from USCA." So I took it. It was Dan's secretary, and she said, "Mr. Katana, the chancellor would like to invite you and your family to come to the trustees box and watch the game at Carolina with him this coming weekend with his family." And I knew people who got invited to the trustees box were big time donors, which I was not one. And I told her, I'm like, "Madam, I am quite sure you have the wrong person." And she says, "No, Brian Katonic, right?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "No, you're the one he wants." So I went home and said, "Hey, honey, we're going to the trustees box this weekend." And you know what? We had a great time. Dan, I never told you this, but I actually brought my checkbook with me because I was waiting for the sales pitch to come, but thankfully that never came.
Hey, Brian, I'm just going to say this. We still have high hopes for you about being a great donor. So
So tell us how's your first 4 years at USC Aiken been?
it's great. It's really been a whirlwind. And, everything I've believed and what attracted me to USC Aiken has really come true. And if your watchers, have taken a look at our website or the Aiken Standard, there are really a lot of great things going on here. Of course, the Advanced Manufacturing Collaborative. In fact, you can see drawing of it in the back there, right behind me, maybe. That's pretty much finished and will be dedicated in August, officially opened then. So that's on our campus, and that's going to provide, of course, that's of course a national lab building on our campus. In fact, if you drive by, you'll notice they just put up the sign on that. But USC Aiken, we will have some space in there, about 2,500 square feet. So our students, faculty, and staff, our engineering program, part of it will move over to there. So our students and faculty will have access to these world-class scientists and engineers, and of course, those great facilities
So
as
how did that
well.
come about? They decided to put that on the campus.
Well, I give a lot of credit to my predecessor, Dr. Jordan. She and Teresa Haas, who, as you know, is on the Aiken County Commission for Higher Education, which they really serve as the stewards of all higher education land. They work very hard along with Senator Young. Really, this is a project that has been going on for nearly a decade. And I think the lab always wanted to have something outside of the fence so that they could promote things like technology transfer and collaboration with institutions of higher education, but also businesses as well. The bomb factory, as it used to be called, was always behind the barbed wire and the people with guns, as it probably needs to be for some of the things they do. But these are things that they can do outside of the walls. And again, it is really a an attempt that I believe will be successful by the lab to be more integrated into the outside world. And we're just grateful to be really the host of it on our campus, because we know our students and faculty will be able to take great advantage of it.
Well, Dan, I'm a graduate of USC Aiken, and the university has always been unique in that the town of Aiken has always strongly supported the university, and it seems like the two entities have worked hand in hand to better each other.
Yeah, there's no question. The city enjoys tremendous support. As you know, the university started at Banksia. That was the original location. In fact, one of our famous symbols of that close connection between USC Aiken and Aiken is the double knot. And you may know that we have a fountain, I believe it's over by the Penland building,
Right.
that really shows the connection, intertwined connection. I think that's the point of the double knot between Aiken and the university. And just sort of a little preview of things to come. One of the things that we're going to be doing that is related to the double knot is revealing our new brand later in August. I think it's August 23rd. USC Aiken will take over downtown, at which time we will reveal our new brand. And what it is, it will be, as you'll see, the USCA, but sort of in the form of the double net, paying homage to that. It's going to be really cool, a really modern looking symbol of the university, which is reflective of the evolution of the university. Of course, we still offer wonderful liberal arts and humanities. As you know, we really began as a humanities and liberal arts school with teacher education as well. But nearly half of our incoming students major in a STEM field: science, technology, engineering, or math. So in many ways, the university has evolved considerably. So more modern, more relevant. We're also, and folks will see this in about a month and a half, will reveal our new athletic logo as
Okay.
well, which will still be the Pacers, but a little bit more updated pacer. So it's going to be really exciting, and I think folks will be able to have access to good merchandise like high quality shirts and stuff. So in fact, there'll be a lot of giveaways in downtown Aiken. Again, I think it's August 23rd. There'll be a lot of press about that as well. So it's really exciting. But again, my point is that that symbol of the USCA really is evident of the double knot, which represents the point you made. That is the very close connection and the support we get from Aiken, which has been really considerable.
Right now, undergraduate, how many students are there at USCA?
Well, we have a total of 4,000 students, and probably all but maybe 800, so 3,200 undergraduates, about 800 graduates, and most of those graduate students, by the way, are Masters of Business Administration students. 6 years ago we had 40 MBA students.
Really?
Now we have nearly over 500 students, and we've added a master's in computer information system that just started. So we expect that those graduate numbers to really increase. Yeah, we've been really pleased with our enrollment. If not to bring up the misfortune of other schools, but if you look nationally at university or regionally at universities like USC Aiken, a regional comprehensive university, many of them are facing some serious challenges, and not the least of which is a decline in enrollment. And of course, there are some sad stories about some private universities, including one in South Carolina that not too recently,
Limestone, right?
Yeah, it was forced to close. So, I mean, that's a terrible situation. But even public schools, if you take a look to our neighbors to the north, but also elsewhere, we cannot take for granted state funding or even enrollment because students have a lot of choices for higher education, a lot of online for-profit universities and stuff like that. Schools like Columbia and Clemson, are also interested in growing their student bodies. So, we certainly compete with them as well for students. But again, we're really pleased with the trajectory of our enrollment because, we don't count, solely on the support of the state. We're grateful to Senator Young and the delegation. They do great jobs advocating for USC Aiken. We had a great legislative year as well. But, we don't take that for granted either. So that means that schools like ours at USC Aiken, we heavily rely on enrollment and the tuition that we get from students, which, by the way, bragging point here, we have not raised tuition for 8 years at USC Aiken.
That's
so the student, right? So the students who come in who will join us this fall in 2025 will pay the same tuition students paid in 2017. Which obviously, as you know, Brian, especially in your business, there's been a thing called inflation.
Yeah.
Right. In the past few years. So, and I attribute that again, not just to some of our legislative support, but, we run a pretty lean and efficient ship over here, and our folks work because we have great faculty and staff who, make it work. Not to say we don't have some pain points now and then. We'd like more money, of course, but we make do with what we have, and as long as our enrollment continues to increase just a little bit every year, that's kind of our goal. We don't want to do anything wild because we've got to support those students, but as long as a few percentage points a year. I mean, last year we had record enrollment, nearly 10% enrollment growth, which is in our largest freshman class in history, 700 freshmen. As long as we continue to do that, we're going to be just fine.
Are most
I forgive me, I missed that.
okay? Are most of the students from a close radius of Aiken, or are there many out?
Yeah, we serve our region, and that is why we exist. And of course, that Brian, is going to be a great opportunity for us because part of our strategy is to recruit students from beyond the 35-mile area. Many of our students, you're right, we get great students from Aiken, North Augusta, our surrounding counties. We serve them well. And the great thing about that is when students graduate from USC Aiken, the overwhelming majority stay in Aiken.
Mhm.
And that's important. As you know, there's a huge demand for workforce here, in particular in high demand fields like nursing, engineers. We just added electrical engineering, and it's very important that if we educate them here, that they stay in South Carolina, even though we're only, 15 miles or so from Georgia, and over 80% of our students stay here and make their homes in our region, which is so important. In fact, one of the more compelling factors we used to get that electrical engineering is that we said, hey, these USC Aiken trained engineers are going to stay in our community, and we have the data to show it. But yeah, we serve our region. But again, because we offer outstanding programs in areas that not every university offers, mechanical engineering, industrial engineering, now electrical, cybersecurity, data science. I mean, increasingly more schools are offering them. But these are majors not everyone has, so we believe we can go to larger cities in South Carolina and get students to come here to Aiken and major in them. And then hopefully, again, once they graduate, they remain, not just in South Carolina, but in the CSRA.
Here to the workforce, college graduates, better income, better educated. So yeah, certainly. So I would imagine some
in that major. I think that's a great benefit that people get educated here, they stay here, they add our economy, they add our growth. I think it's just a win-win between the university and the city. Now, I know one major that you've added recently that you're very excited about is the cybersecurity major.
Cybersecurity.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I was just at the Board of Trustees, and we're getting another cybersecurity major approved this past Friday. But oh yes, definitely, because as you know, this past May 27th, we broke ground. Of course, it was inside because it was raining, on the South Carolina National Guard Cyber Integration Center, which will be right next door to the AMC, that building that is about to be finished. In fact, it's going to be right where the old softball field
Right.
is. In fact, that's going to get knocked down pretty soon. And, in that cyber integration center will be our regional security operations center, and which is the regional, or it's called the RSOC. What it is, and by the way, it is staffed by our students. They monitor at an RSOC, regional security operations. They monitor the bad cyber intrusions that are attempted to infiltrate our system. And we not only use that to protect our infrastructure, but we also have partnerships with local towns, school districts, and we protect their infrastructure as well. And we have it already. It's up and running over in the Penland building, but it will be moved over to the Cyber Integration Center once that's done. And again, much as the same is true for the AMC at the Cyber Integration Center, our students will have access to those cyber warriors and others and the facilities that will be housed in the National Guard, South Carolina National Guard Cyber Integration Center. And interestingly, another part of that project, in addition to the Cyber Integration Center, which will be located next to the AMC, across the parkway, over by the Convocation Center, the Guard is building its Readiness Center. So it's a huge facility. In fact, if you drive up into the Convocation Center and look to the left, you'll see what will become the driveways over there. That's where the National Guard will practice on the weekends.
Okay.
And the great thing from USC Aiken's point of view, the university will have access to those facilities during the week, which includes classrooms, conference areas, locker rooms, and even kitchens and stuff as well. So we're really benefiting and leveraging these partnerships that we have with the Department of Energy, the lab, and also the South Carolina National Guard. So, the campus, landscape is very much changing, as I think people can notice.
I think if I'm correct, I think the university owns a lot of land on the other side of the road, right?
Yeah. In fact, one of the more exciting things, and I don't think all that many people know about it, is that, we have about 90 or so acres that is not being used. And so we're blessed in that respect. If you go to Charleston, for example, the College of Charleston, which I think you may have been there not too long ago, a lot of universities are landlocked, and finding space, it's of course expensive. But one of the more interesting things that we're going to do, we recently completed a facilities master plan, which is basically sort of a map of our university land and us sort of envisioning what will be our facilities needs for the next 5 to 10 years. Now, of course, as I mentioned, we don't expect to get $50 million in 1 year to put up a building. I mean, that's just not going to happen. And as a result, many universities, including us, are looking seriously into public-private partnerships. In fact, we just signed with a firm that, in fact, they're going to be on campus tomorrow, that will do a feasibility study, the economic feasibility study of some of our land, not all of it, and in perhaps pursuit of what could be public-private partnerships like mixed use, student housing, even things like amenities like restaurants, things that will enhance the quality of student life on campus, but also the quality of the lives of people living around the university. If you've noticed around Trolley Line Run Road, there's quite a lot of development there. So, by working with private developers who will frankly assume the risk, we would lease them the land. This is typically how it works. Right. They would assume the risk. They will look at the economic studies, the demographic studies, and figure out what is feasible. Of course, the university would have to approve any projects that we believe would first and foremost serve our students and our mission. But then they would construct these facilities that, of course, the university would use. But again, so would the public. We're very interested here in having the public come onto our campus and to be closer to us and get to know us better. And again, that's a way we serve them. Of course, we have a swimming pool. We have the lifelong learning program. Of course, we have the cardiac rehabilitation program that we work with the hospital. Of course, the Etheridge Center offers cultural access to the people of Aiken. So again, I think within 5 to 10 years, this area around Aiken here will develop. In fact, the Chamber of Commerce has been working with us to sort of envision, and this is appropriate, a sort of an innovation corridor over here in this part of Aiken. I mean, obviously we have the AMC, we soon will have the Cyber Integration Center. Of course, we have the university, in which, of course, innovation is very important. But we believe, and I think one of the promises 10 years ago with the AMC was not that we would just have the Advanced Manufacturing Collaborative, but that it would, much like the Georgia Cyber Center has done, attract businesses and industries to this area, because they will want, these businesses and industries, partnerships with the Department of Energy, with the lab, with the university, and perhaps even with the National Guard. So sort of serving as magnets. So really diversifying, if you will, Aiken's economy, over here, on this side of Aiken, that will really again enhance the quality of life for Aiken and in Aiken County.
Well, there is zero doubt in my mind that the university is in great hands with your leadership. But enough about that. Let's get to the important question. How are the Packers going to be this year? If you don't know, the Chancellor is a big Green Bay Packers fan.
Oh yes, diehard. In fact, if you read my biography, I made sure that's there. But yes, I'm one of the owners, but of course I'm one of 500,000 owners of the Packers, you know, which means at one point, truth be told, I think I paid $250 and they gave me a piece of paper.
There you go. Okay.
And that's what I got, and that's what I got for it. But I can claim to be an owner. Well, I think they're going to have a good year. Now, I don't know if they're going to win the division. They'll definitely have a winning record. I don't want to be greedy, which of course Packer fans are. Of course, I grew up in the 80s when they were terrible.
Right.
So it is really an embarrassment of riches for people who are younger than I am. But I predict, let's see how many games they've had. I predict 11-6 this year, and they'll win at least one playoff game. So, but we're lucky, with the transition from Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love, is about as smooth as it could be. So I'm hopeful to go up to Green Bay of course, I grew up only 20 miles from Green Bay, which I don't miss the snow. I miss the people, and I miss the summers and the early fall and the late spring, but not so much after November. But I'm hopeful to see a game there. But if my wife goes with me, it's definitely going to have to be September to October. There is no way that I'll be able to get her to go anything past probably October 15th or so.
Yeah, I bet.
Well, Dan, I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I hope to see you around real soon.
You will, and I really appreciate it, Brian. Thanks so much for your interest.
Thanks.
Thanks again to Chancellor Heimmermann, and thank you guys for listening again. Hope you have a great summer. We'll be back real soon. And remember, you don't want to know what's going on in Aiken. You want to know what's shaking in Aiken. See you real soon.